So welcome everyone. We'll start with a short meditation this morning. Find a comfortable position. Wherever you are, just notice the sense of safety that you have where you are right now. We're here at the KBV Meditation Center in Sunnyvale, California. It's a beautiful, bright, sunny Saturday morning. Very quiet neighborhood. Can really have that sense of safety, comfort. Good conditions for relaxing, closing your eyes, letting go, setting aside whatever activities and busyness or concerns, just right now in this present moment, you have everything that you need. When I was in ministry school at the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, there was a short song that everyone would sing together at the end, and one of the lines was, "In this moment, all of my needs are met." So very interesting reminder. As with everything else in the Dhamma, we can reflect upon whether or not we agree with that, whether we think it's true. Not taking anything for granted, not taking anything on blind faith, but investigating. Noticing how what we hear, what we see, what we taste, touch, smell, think affects us. As we relax into meditation, we can check on our body. Starting at the top of our head, noticing our face, or if there's any tightness around the eyes or in the jaw, and just inviting that to relax. Inviting the shoulders and the arms and the hands to just let go and relax. Noticing how your back feels. And invite the muscles in the back to relax. and also the belly. Sometimes we can hold tension there. You can invite it to let go, relax. Putting our attention on our legs, feet. Inviting all the muscles to relax. Reminding the body that you're safe. Whatever is going on in life in this moment, it's okay to just relax, let go. Take a break. Smile to ourselves. Feel the rhythm of the breath. If there's some pain or discomfort in the body, we can choose to put attention there with some kindness and compassion. Or we can choose to bring the mind to a different part of the body that's peaceful, comfortable. It depends. Depends on what's really going on in the body. And what the result is when you put your attention on that area. Sometimes attention, maybe thinking in terms of sort of breathing into that area. Of course, that's a mental action coordinated with the breath. Can actually bring some maybe extra blood flow, I'm not sure, but at least energetic flow to an area of distress. Sometimes that brings relief. Other times with chronic pain, it can be better to put your attention somewhere else. Relax everything in the body. Or even tighten some other muscles somewhere else and then relax further when they release. And experiment. And notice if anything changes. If it changes in a positive direction or not. And with the mind, noticing the activity of the mind, inviting it to become calm. Can notice the mood of the mind, the backdrop, the feeling tone. And bring in something, an image that brings happiness, joy, spiritual uplift, encouragement. flatten the mind. And just notice how that feels. Maybe that's an image, or maybe it's a phrase, or just a thought. Maybe it's of the Buddha or the Dhamma, or the enlightened Sangha. Maybe it's a teacher or a friend. Or maybe it's a thought about your own progress, your own development, your own actions of generosity and kindness, your own moral virtue, the good qualities that you've been developing. And it brings a sense of inner peace and joy. This is the time of year when many people think about bringing peace and joy to the world. It's through our own meditation and inner reflection that we can bring the peace and joy to our own mind. And it's not as though it just comes from some personal inner source only. Because when we become still, we connect to the Dhamma. We can be aware of the knowing that is not personal. It's like a deep river underground that we all have access to, that we can drink from and share. This is peaceful. This is sublime. The stilling of all activities, the letting go of all attachments, the ending of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. I've been thinking a bit lately about how much our suffering, our dukkha, is attached to the desire to be safe, and how natural and even imperative it is for us as human beings to try to have some level of safety in our life. And when you think about the situation of being born into a human body and how vulnerable we are, and how from the very beginning we depend upon those who take care of us in order to survive. And we live in this world that has so many dangers. So, of course, we want to be safe. And it's good to, um, learn about what can harm us physically and what can harm us emotionally, and, to really make the effort, wear the seatbelts, um, you know, try to organize things or make choices that help to provide safety, put the fence around the swimming pool, for ourselves and for others, doing what we can. But when we want to, when we think about wanting to work with dukkha, to become free of suffering, then of course we want to turn towards the dukkha, as the Buddha said in the Noble Truths, And the Buddha really encouraged us as practitioners to reflect on the reality that we are in, that we all are subject to aging, sickness, and death. Some of this reflection was happening for me a couple of nights ago at the Hermitage. I was in my kuti, and there was a raging storm, lots of wind and lots of rain. You hear like a branch falling on the roof, and reflecting on how, even though being in the kuti feels pretty safe, certainly safer than if I was outside in the cold and the dark and the rain, and so very grateful to have shelter. But it's also possible we've got all these very big trees around us for a tree to fall on the house. We know of people in Boulder Creek, in the town near where we live, and this happens this last year, maybe, a tree falling on a house, falling right on your bed. We don't have control of these things. I mean, you could say, well, don't live in the forest, don't live in Boulder Creek, but here we are in Sunnyvale. It could be an earthquake, could be a fire. No matter where you are, there. I grew up in the land of tornadoes. There was a tornado warning for Santa Cruz County the other day. They revoked it later, but this is the world we live in. And the mind automatically reacts to what it sees, hears, and takes in through the other senses. And there's dukkha, when we feel like there's something threatening. And I think it's valuable to just see how much of our habit patterns of aversion or feeling angry or aggressive or frightened, really has to do with that fundamental safety that we want to create in order to survive, in order to be at ease. And I guess my reflection on it was it's helpful to recognize that that's so normal and natural. Like there's a compassion that arises in my mind for myself, for that part that feels like a separate, vulnerable human being that really wants to feel comfortable and safe, and that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing blamable about that. And just be able to turn towards that and see it and accept it with a kind of open kindness. And then to look at, well, what does a practitioner do to be present with that, to know it, and then to bring in the Dhamma, because we also have this assurance from the Buddha, like you see at the end of the Mangala Sutta, that everywhere, every place for them is safe. So how do we go from this separate self, vulnerable in the world, with all these dangers and things that can go wrong, if we want to call it that, all these things, all these dangers that are natural, are part of what we experience, to everywhere, every place for them is safe, like how do we have that kind of confidence and stability? And of course, every religion kind of addresses this one way or another. And many of us have experienced or attempted to just pick up a set of beliefs that we can convince ourselves of, so we're not worried. Maybe if we accept the right thing, then we can feel like we're safe. It's one way to look at it. But actually, if we really are wanting to be prepared for things that can happen, which we hear most people aren't. Like I was talking to a funeral director one time, and she said most people come and they're not prepared for their loved one to pass away. And talk to medical professionals, and they say most people at the end of life, they're not prepared. They don't, even if they've been told they have a very short time to live, they don't expect it to happen the day it happens. We're always pushing it away. That's part of our plan for safety, for feeling safe, but it doesn't actually work. So, of course, those of you who are here, that the Buddha said things like, encouraging, especially the monastics, but how I feel about that. This is for everyone. And the Buddha talked to lay people like this too. Before this practice of, before you go to sleep at night, you think, well, I could die tonight. I could die. I could have a heart attack. I could, a tree could fall on my house. When you see it in the suttas, it's like I could be bitten by a snake. There's all these dangers, that all these things could happen to end my life tonight. And then he said, when you get up in the morning, you think about all the dangers that could happen during the day that could end my life. Well, this isn't the way most people think or want to think. I remember one time bringing this up, and someone who was listening just broke out in laughter. It's like, kind of like, um, really, do we have to go through this, But yes, in a way, like really, if we pay attention to our mind and our patterns and how we want to do what we, naturally, maybe our habit is to try to push these things away and to not look, then we can't break through. We can't break through to a point where we can be with the way things actually are and understand that there's more than this material world, that there's more than this life, and that we can be present with whatever arises from a place of Dhamma and find that safety in something that's really reliable, if that makes sense. I'm sure to most of you, yes, that would match what you experience through the development of the practice, development of your perception of reality. Through the reflection upon and the intention to take the Dhamma as the basis of our life instead of the sense of self. So I've been finding it helpful when, something happens and that impulse to like it or to dislike it or to want to pull away from it or act like it didn't happen or whatever our patterns are, when being aware of that, to really look, well, is this just this organism wanting to be safe? Okay. It's like there's something bigger that comes in, this position from which we observe the situation, the experience, and to feel the compassion for that and um, the letting go of that need, that requirement, that impulse, and the training, if you will, the ability to recognize that there is this peace, contentment, confidence, connection, knowing the Buddha, observing the Dhamma experience in us. It's kind of hard with words. Ajahn Sumedho's been saying that experience is something that happens through the senses, and you don't really experience the unconditioned. That's a different experience. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you could come up with the right words. I think he says, the words are just sankharas, like everything else here. And it can only be known directly. So that quote from the suttas that I used during the guided meditation, this is peaceful, this is sublime. The stilling of all activities, the letting go of all attachments, the ending of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. I really like that. I really like to reflect on that. I have a couple of laminated pieces of paper that have that on it, in different places in my kuti. And I just come back to that. But we also need to understand it. I heard someone recently talk about cessation and noticing cessation. But the kind of thing that I think they were referring to is the cessation due to the change of circumstances. Like we talk about everything being impermanent in this realm, and then we hope for the ending of the what seems to be the proximal cause of our dukkha. And things do end. Physical pain, situations where we're threatened, we feel threatened. But that's not the cessation that the Buddha is talking about. It's the cessation of being affected by it. It's the cessation of identifying with these things as personal. So that we can be free regardless of what the current situation is and how it's affecting us. Because even the effect on us is not something we need to take personally. We react, we respond from our old conditioning. And we're going to feel the impact. We're going to feel sadness and happiness and excitement and the whole range. We can use all of those experiences to step back and observe and bring in the Dhamma. And put it in context. Put it in the context of Dhamma, not in the context of this is me, mine, and I feel it, and I don't like it, or I like it, I want more, or I don't want it to be this way anymore. All of that, knowing that there's no end to that. There's no real relief as long as we're taking that position. And that shift is something we learn. Certainly there's insight that comes, but regardless of when that might happen, we train the mind. And through the training of the mind, we find that relief and that confidence. It gradually develops. There is the gradual training, the gradual development. And there is an end to it. There's an end to the training. There is that going from the trainee to the awakened, where there's no going back. Somebody said to me recently that the practice is the same for the trainee and the arahant, the awakened one. And we see that in the suttas to some degree, where the Buddha, or Venerable Sariputta, and I can't remember who the other enlightened monk was talking about this, but these places where they talk about, how do you train when you're a stream enterer? And then they go up the list to the arahant, and the training is the same. But there the Buddha says, the work is done, but you still have these experiences of pleasant, painful, and pleasant and painful. But you're not affected by it. There's no direct line to the heart like there was in the past. And you might notice this before the work is finished, that some experiences that used to just go like lightning right to the heart don't have that access anymore. Maybe it's lust, maybe it's anger. And it's you still feel it, you're still aware of it, it still happens, but it's not the same. Doesn't have that ability to catch fire in your heart, in your mind anymore. And then that's useful to notice that we have some distance from the trigger, from the triggering event. And we can increase that distance and that wisdom that comes to understanding it and the compassion for this living being that is experiencing these things. And seeing where it ends, where the world comes to an end, where the experience is grounded in the unconditioned, in the Dhamma. I think I'll just stop right there. Any comments or questions? Marilyn?
You think it's possible to feel safe dying? You safely die?
I think so.
I think so too. And it sounds funny, but there was a poem, I can't remember all the rest of it, but like, what have I ever lost by dying? I like dying, you know?
Yeah,
It seems to me that, yeah, you can feel comfortable in, okay, it's time to go, that kind of thing.
yeah. You can even feel comfortable in the sudden death. Sometimes people remember past lives and they remember dying.
Well, I had an experience in the hospital where I thought, okay, I'm dying. It's done. I'm over. It's now. And I thought, how mundane this is. It just seemed, I thought it was going to be more dramatic somehow.
Mhm.
And then yeah, anyway, I didn't die after all.
Yeah,
But I wondered whether I was dying afterwards because I thought I was. And it just seemed like another thing to do.
right. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. I mean, the thing that sometimes can be known like through a near-death experience or through a past life memory of dying is that once the consciousness leaves the bodily suffering is over. I think if we're prepared by practicing not being so attached to our body, it's easier to let go, to head off on that journey without so much clinging, and to know that there's nothing to be afraid of. I love this. Ram Dass said he went to his teacher and said, you know, people are worried about dying. What should I tell them? And his teacher said, tell them it's perfectly safe. And of course, you know, living a life with moral virtue and generosity and kindness, you know, really helps. What our views are, what our beliefs are, can really have a big impact. My grandfather was very much into, you know, Calvinistic religion, and there was a lot of talk of how just about everybody's going to hell, and he was very afraid at the end of his life. Well, it makes sense. Joy, the quote Joyce loves so much about, you know, like what you ponder upon and think about regularly is what you become. Yeah, so of course the mind is set up in that case to really be afraid and worried, but we don't need to do that. I like those six recollections that I brought up during the guided meditation, where, you know, if you really think about the Buddha, think about the Dhamma, think about the potential and the actual experience that people have of awakening since the Buddha left, since the passing away of the particular Buddha of our era, you know, and thinking about our own virtue and our own generosity, thinking about the devas and the qualities that they had to be able to be in the deva realm, and how you have those same qualities. And where we feel like, well, I don't have those qualities, and develop them. You have that capacity. And every day that we, you know, like put some energy towards that is a day that we are blessed, and that the karma we create brings blessings again and again and again into our life, over and over. And we can see that, we can witness that ourselves directly. So we build our own safety, even though the world's not safe, it's safe inside. It's why is every place for them safe? It's because there's safety within, there's safety embodied in our own experience of body and mind. Catherine?
Hi. Um, so I think I have sort of two questions. So most of my experience of fear in my life has been like a sort of psychological, you know, like anxiety. I'll always feel like anxiety is under when people say they have anxiety, you know, experiencing fear all the time is feels more than that term that is put on it of anxiety. Which really I only solved when I started to meditate and it lifted. Um, so a few years ago, I put together a little guided meditation for myself, which kind of brought in, it was sort of, you know, to make a sort of a potent guided meditation, being in all the elements, which really helped me let go of fear. Um, and there's one phrase in that which really helps me, and I'm kind of wondering how much it fits with Dharma. Well, not to say the phrase in that is it's sort of in metta, there's this sense of that only love can look upon me. I don't know if I've stolen that from somewhere, if it just came up in my mind. But it's sort of the sense of when there is metta in me, and then I connect with the sense of metta in others, that only the metta in other people sees the metta in me, or the Dharma, you know, like sort of the Dharma connects between people. So there's no need to be afraid of other people because maybe they have metta or Dharma or the capacity for metta and Dharma, and when I have the capacity for metta and dharma, there's nothing to fear in the relationship because those two things see each other,
Uh-huh.
maybe. Um, but the other sort of bit of that is sort of a sense of a disappearing of the edges when in metta, like the just the metta's there and the, sort of the physical boundaries evaporate. Um, and so something you were saying just earlier, and then there was something I heard you say in a talk quite a long time ago, probably, that I was listening to about that the Buddha didn't believe, or did the Buddha never said there was a one, like, we're not part of a one, or, there's no like source to return to, or some kind of, so I guess, yeah, this sort of sense of safety maybe comes from a sense of this dissolution of myself,
Mhm.
because if there's no self, who's afraid? But then is there a sense in Buddhism of, of this connection with others, or this connection in, I mean, there's connection in metta, isn't there? Because metta connection.
Yeah,
Is there a question there, maybe?
yeah. Well, let me see. Let me see how I can do it. One thing that I find touching, I guess I would say, that might relate to this, because there is that metta connection, like you say, the seeing the good in other people, seeing um, the good in ourselves and how that meets, but also that we are, as I think it might have been Ajahn Buddhadasa who started his talks, one of the Kruvajans, with friends in aging, sickness, and death. That we have this, we share this experience. Um, we all suffer in this incarnation, and to recognize that too has a bond with others, and that often is, when we see someone else suffering, some other living being, and the urge to want to relieve that suffering and to help them, even sometimes at the very risk of our own life. You know of people, like I heard of someone was at an overlook or something, and the person slipped, and this other person grabbed them, and they're pulling them back up over the edge, and their own life is at risk. They could all both go down the ravine, but they're saving their life, and this happens, and it's like we do resonate with each other, and we, you know oftentimes people who live together especially can kind of, we pick up on what the other person is thinking about, and there's definitely a connection, and there's definitely this ability to come together and feel the power of that metta, that love, that inspiration, the Dhamma. It's like you can create this field. So we do this as human beings together, coming together. And it's true in other religions. Go into a cathedral or a temple, and you can feel that energy sometimes, where you really, kind of like, maybe like individual lightning rods that together create this space of spiritual energy and uplift, even more than the trees. Those beautiful big redwoods, human beings have this capacity. And so when we're um, feeling that metta in ourselves, and we're seeing that, and relating to others, it certainly kind of evokes that. We do evoke things in each other. We're like tuning forks. Like how you, like if you hit a tuning fork and you have another tuning fork over here, the one that wasn't even hit vibrates along with the one that you've, started with. And so I do think that's true. And when that heart quality is at the forefront, yeah, we don't have to have the fear. I don't even know if the fear can be present at that point, because what's really in the one seat of the mind, you might say, is that loving kindness, is that Brahma Vihara, even if it's metta, compassion, mudita, or equanimity. So I think that's true. Now, this idea of the one, I think the way to not to this isn't about dampening or squashing or blasting apart or whatever the sense of it would be, the idea that we're connected. It's more about recognizing that as individual personalities, we see ourselves as separate and vulnerable. But in the Dhamma, there is this connection. And when you listen to the Kruba Ajahns, there's also a perfection when we're not, in this kind of perception of being separate selves. To recognize we can witness the fact that this that I think of as myself is a constantly changing collection of processes. There's no definite me. All of this that I perceive as myself will dissolve. When the Buddha said, what's left after the Buddha passes away, what's left after an Arahant dies? He said, if you think about it as something continues eternally or something is finished, you're not looking at it in the right way. Ajahn Mahabua said too, it's not about do I go on or do I end? It's something completely different. It's above that. It's, so we don't have words for it. We're not asked to believe in it, but we do know it at some level when we connect deeply with the Dhamma through our development of the Noble Eightfold Path. And the only way to open up to that is by facing the experience we have, perceiving ourselves as separate, so that we can break through that conditioning. Did that address it? Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't hear that, Catherine.
Oh, no, I'd say that addressed a lot of questions there.
Yeah, thank you. Neil?
Not a question, just a thought that came to me when Catherine was talking about sort of identifying or connecting the metta in herself with someone else, the metta seeing each other, just immediately made me think of the Hindu idea of namaste. I honor the something in you that I also see in myself. I mean, there's nothing else to say about that other than that it popped into my mind.
It also popped into my mind. And I think that's, I was going to say a pretty universal understanding and experience. I'm not sure. I just think that's fundamentally a part of this experience of being a separate self and seeing others as separate selves, and then coming to the realization that there's something more than that, and that there's this goodness in every living being, no matter how covered over with moss and debris it might be, or how immediately apparent and shining, you know, to recognize that. Yeah. Yes, Philip?
Can I give a shout out to the Upasika program? Just reflecting on the past year and some of the activities that we did in the program were really helpful. I remember years ago when I first came to you and I did the chanting, right? That verse, that phrase, unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. Like my first reaction to that passage was like, oh, it's kind of like superstition, like, oh, like physically taking refuge, like what does that mean? It's like I'm getting protection somehow. And at one point, I realized, oh, like the practice, having confidence in the Dhamma, um, seeing like how I don't despair as much, like, oh, my practice is it. I'm getting something from the practice. Like I have confidence in the Dhamma, and the protection is like like I see things differently, right? Like I kind of glimpsed it in a conceptual level. Like it's not so much the something is protecting me. It's I the practice helps me in not despairing, like not being attached to whatever problems I'm having. Right, that was years ago, and I kind of glimpsed it and had a conceptual kind of understanding of it. But in the past year in the Upasika program, I think the thing that's kind of slowly helped me adjust a little more is the examining my own conduct, the the journaling exercises, especially the thinking about, oh, well, this happened today. How did I feel about it? Um, what was my intention when I did it? Um, it helped. It kind of evolved that understanding a little more. Um, I was talking to you last night about the understanding my own conduct, right? Like, oh, it does mean something. You know, not just the if something went wrong, it's my fault, but also well, what was my intention when I did it? Um, was I really, you know, what was my intention? Like that matters too. And that kind of naturally helped me. It evolved that sense of the protection of the Dhamma, because now it's not so much like it's not so overwhelming when things happen.
Yeah.
It's I feel like there's more of a like a broader view of events. Like I'm not so caught up in the what just went wrong, but it's just a more objective view of things. And I'm not so it's not so personalized. I can get past it better. I'm not so attached to things. Anyway, that I got a lot of that was like very beneficial in the Upasika program. So thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful, Philip. I was reflecting on this idea of intention. Someone asked a question not long ago about how much does our intention matter? If our intention is pure, does the impact that my action, my words have on someone else, does it carry the negative karma based on the impact, or does it carry the positive karma based on the intention, if my intention was good? And of course, this is an interesting reflection because, of course, we don't want to have an adverse effect on someone else because of our lack of understanding or our lack of skill. However, the intention really does make a huge difference in terms of the karma. We want to be careful. We want to develop our awareness and understanding so that we are not, you know, absent-mindedly doing something or out of ignorance doing something that's harmful in any way. But that's an ongoing process of development. There are times when, without intending anything, someone gets hurt. And one example is, like, we had a minister in our community when I was a child, and he was a very, very good man and a very kind person. And he was driving through along the road there somewhere around the town, and this little girl ran out right in front of his car and she died. And it must have been horrible for him. But he had no intention, he couldn't even do anything. She just popped out right at the last minute. He didn't see her at all until she was, in front of the car. And like that kind of thing, sometimes I think about our civil laws, and, that kind of thing is an accident. The Buddha said accidents can happen that don't have anything to do with our past action. It doesn't necessarily caused by our karma. And then, you have another situation, like I remember once living in Palo Alto. A lot of times people would bike on the roads coming down from Skyline. It's a very exciting downhill bike ride kind of thing. And there was one place where I think 4 bicyclists were off to the side of the road, and this person was driving and they were not paying attention. They were, messing with their radio or something, and they went off the road and they hit these 4 bicyclists and killed them all. And that kind of thing, I think in our law, you might be charged with some kind of maybe involuntary manslaughter or something like that. But again, there was no intention, but there wasn't attention either. And it's like we're reflecting on these kinds of things, like what would happen karmically. Not to say that I actually know exactly, but I do see from the Vinaya, from the suttas, that without that intention to kill or the intention to harm, the karma is way less. If there is somehow, certainly there's immediate result of the feeling of guilt and remorse. But, it's like the intention, the desire to kill someone, the effort one puts in to do something like that, regardless of whether the mind is distorted by some kind of ideal or idea, there's going to be some real results from that. So just kind of like, I think, does this relate, Philip?
Yeah. And you're also reminding me of the genius of the precepts and how it's laid out. It's like, well, I really did not intend to break any precepts. And
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like there's protection, a feeling of protection from that. Like I didn't go out of bounds.
Right. And the precepts, when we take them and we reflect on them and we are making an effort to keep them, that also helps us be more aware and present when we're in situations. I was in terms of safety, I was thinking about a situation where this man working at one of the high-tech companies went for a walk in the afternoon at lunchtime, and he was just walking on the sidewalk, and a car, like someone lost control of the car and just came up on the sidewalk and hit him and killed him. And like we never know what's going to happen to us, but like what's the, it's not like you could be holding precepts and still have something like that happen, but it's going to be, it's like, what are all the causes and conditions? It's good, I think, to think about this thing that Ajahn Punadamo said to the bhikkhunis recently, that, to understand that everything in this world has a cause. When we look at it all as sankharas, sankharas mean that they're conditioned phenomena. They are in existence because of some cause. And it's not just a single cause, but it's more than one cause. Like we can see how that works. There's a confluence of causes that lead to some situation. So it doesn't, and the Buddha said, don't try to unravel what was the karma that caused this thing to happen. Because he said, if you try to figure that out, your head will explode. But instead, just reflect on how my thoughts, my words, my actions have this cause going into the future, and what I can do now to be more in alignment with Dhamma, with the precepts, with the Brahma Viharas, with wisdom, with the mindfulness and sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension, in order to just live this life happily and grounded and embodied in the Dhamma rather than this sense of self. So much of the time, because we want safety, we're worried about what other people think of us. We're worried about what they say to us. We hold on to our grievances. We do all of these things. We think we're protecting ourselves, but actually that's not where the protection is. The protection is in how we behave, how we think, how we speak, and how we hold the reality of Dhamma and the reality of this world being this whole tangle of causes and conditions. And then we can let go of activities. We can let go of what we're clinging to, our attachments. We can let go of all these things that are unnecessary to our happiness and impede and destroy our happiness and our peace and our sense of safety. Yeah, thank you. Caredwin?
Thank you, Ayya. Thanks for this talk. I appreciate it. I just want to note that Joyce is ahead of me. And
I'm sorry, it's breaking up a little, Caredwin. Could you say that?
I just note that Joyce had her hand up.
Yeah, but she took it down, and we'll let her decide about that. She can put it back up again if you want to talk, Joyce. Please feel welcome. Go ahead, Caredwin.
Thank you. I get a little confused on this topic because so like 11 or 12 years ago, I had a situation where I thought that I might die because I was having symptoms like stroke symptoms a lot. And everyone around me was kind of freaking out, like, because I was saying, oh, I better make sure I have enough keys so someone can come to get the dog out if I die, It wasn't really, that wasn't my fear. Like, I don't seem to have a fear of death. And, but the things that I'm afraid of are the things like that brought me 6,000 miles away from our home, which is living in a country that is becoming increasingly unsafe, and living with food and housing insecurity as I have a lot of my life, and so I don't know, it's weird because it's like I don't feel like, I guess ultimately that's about surviving and not dying, but it's really the suffering that's involved, I think, that I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but I just get a little bit twisted up around this topic because of this.
Yeah,
Because I don't
think
feel like
get
I
it.
have yeah. Like, I don't want my mom to die a grim death in a nursing home that is for poor people, or to get kicked out of a nursing home and not have the care that she needs. You know what I'm saying?
You
Like,
do.
I'm not afraid of my mom dying. It's okay. She's 90. You know what I mean? It's okay if I die, but I don't want to have a grim death. And I feel like so many people on the planet end up having a grim death because we have a very uncaring society, you know, or a lot of us have very uncaring societies that just sort of allow people to suffer and die. And yeah, so I guess that's the best way I can put it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that it's natural and normal to do what's appropriate to find the requisites that are needed. You know, the food, clothing, shelter, and medicine that are needed to sustain life. And it really helped me to come in contact with the monastic form, because the Buddha made such, you know, baseline acceptable limits or acceptable levels of what that is. And in lay life too, you know, providing for one's food, clothing, shelter, and medicine, and doing the things that the Buddha very much encouraged, you know, like what you gain from honest work, to protect that, to try to make wise decisions about how to take care of yourself and your family. That all makes sense. And there's nothing that's appropriate and good. And then to, you know, like you have shared with us many times, the good things that come across in your life, you know, the ways that people help out, and the ways that uplift and support having our needs met. And, you know, this is a good place to put our attention. We can know that there are the counter forces that can be, you know, causing difficulties for us. But if we put our attention too much on that, we bring more of it into our experience. If we put our attention more on generosity and kindness and the good that people do to help each other and all of that, it actually brings more of that into our life. I do believe and experience this. So, you know, it's like learning how to see our way through that confusion, to see the world as it is, with all of this dark and bright mix of karma, to purify our own mind as best we can, our own actions, and to continue to avoid those who are caught up in that darkness, and incline towards those who are trying to live a moral life, examples of goodness and wisdom and virtue and generosity and faith. And just, you know, like incline in that direction, and then start to trust the karma of our good actions as much as possible, doing what we can to relieve the mind. Sometimes it might be good to go back to that same kind of like, in this moment, all of my needs are met. And to really consider how our worries can, you know, kind of like stir up a lot of fear and concern, when in this moment, all of my needs are met. And of course, this doesn't mean turn a blind eye to the needs to make plans and to do things in the direction. Like, you made a lot of plans and a lot of effort to get to Albania. And I know it's not going to be perfect. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. But in a lot of ways, there's a lot of good that's come from it, from what I understand. So it's trying to stay the course of moving in the direction towards that brightness and make the Kamma that is in line with that through our own actions. Try to we don't let go of the worries and the concerns and the negative thinking by just trying to shove it away. We have to see it and be present with it, and then recognize where it comes from. Just like, the first three noble truths, but bring our higher wisdom to it. So the Buddhism, we're in training for higher virtue, higher mind, and higher wisdom. We need to bring those to the situation we experience in the present moment. And we're headed in an upwards direction, a direction from which we can help others, direction from which we can feel that safety. Even though there's nothing safe around us, it's like the world is constantly presenting threats and, difficult conditions. Keep inclining towards those people and those situations that bring light into the world. What do you think, Carolyn?
I think it's a good reminder, and it's the place that I go very often, is thinking about all the people that supported us to come to get here where we are, all the ongoing support that I have. And I'm not just talking about financial support. I'm talking about, people who check in and how are things going, and is there some way that I can help? Let me connect you with this resource. I mean, there's just an enormous amount of help. And, I just don't want to ignore the dark and pretend it's not there, because I know that a lot of people in the world are suffering right now. And so, like you said, I mean, I don't want to turn a blind eye to it. I don't want to put my entire focus on it. But so I guess that helps a little bit. I still just get a little bit confused. Like, how can I not fear dying, but I fear not having enough to eat, or not being able to take care of my mom, or, things like that. Because ultimately, it's like, what is the fear? Well, I guess the fear ultimately is death, maybe. I don't know. Or it's
in a way, it doesn't matter. In a way, it's like, okay, when fear is there, when anxiety is there, when worries are there, then we turn towards it as dukkha. We use the Buddha's advice, we be present with that dukkha, but we don't add to it by thinking of all the dukkha everybody's experiencing. We have to remember that when the mind goes out to really engage with all this other stuff that's happening in the world, and this is much more possible nowadays with all of the internet and all of the, like learning about all the troubles in the world, and to remember that the whole media system is designed to lean towards accentuating that, when actually there have been these troubles from day one of human existence or animal existence. So it's like, to put too much attention on that distorts our own way of thinking in a way that is not helpful. It's not helpful for us, and it's not helpful for what we can do for others. we need to find the sweet spot, you might say, of knowing enough about what's happening with other people to have that compassion, use it as an impetus to develop the Brahma Viharas and really send out that experience, that metta, karuna, upekkha, to bathe the world in that. Because, we need to look at, well, what can I actually do to help? And what is just ruminating over the suffering and the dukkha of others? Someone told me that someone in their family was thinking so much about the people, and I think, I don't remember if it was Gaza at the time or if it was Ukraine, but they were like, how can I be happy while people are suffering so much in this other place? It's like that kind of thinking is self-destructive. That kind of thinking is not helping anyone in that place. And the Buddha says, grieving doesn't help anybody. Of course, if we feel grief, we want to be with that grief and not in any way be averse to it or condemn it, but hold it as this is the dukkha that's being experienced, and I can be present with it in a way that it can dissolve. That only happens if we let go of the story behind the grief. We don't want to keep going over the stories of suffering. We want to be present with the suffering itself so we can move through it. Because this world it's never going to stop suffering. There's never going to be an end to wars. There's never going to be an end to disagreements. And why is that? It's because we believe in the sense of self. We believe in, I'm an individual. I have my people. I have my country, and we're against you over there doing the bad things. This is the model that creates this problem, and it's why it's not going to end. And just having a birth and having to go through aging, sickness, and death is suffering. The Dhamma gives us this opportunity to see what's really beyond that. That we're not this individual being, that this life is going to come to an end. And then the knowing tells us there's something else. There is love. There is peace. There is tranquility. There is the freedom from suffering. There is nibbana. The Buddha said if there wasn't the unconditioned, we couldn't escape from the conditioned. So this is where we have to put our mind. If we allow the mind to be absorbed in the problems of the world, there's no end to it. We can know it's there. We can have the compassion. We can do what we can. We should do what we can. We help where we can, and we let go. Let go and reside in the Dhamma, which is peaceful, happy, and safe. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, Ayya.
Sophie?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
See you.
Good to see you too. Everything you've shared today and in response to the questions, I've already found to be applicable to my question, but I figure I might as well ask it anyway in case you have more to share. And I'm thinking about ways to apply the teachings today to more subtle and granular relational moments and relationships where it is not life or death, though often in conflict, it can feel that it is. And I'm thinking about how to apply the teachings today, both to myself and how, I show up in relationships and in conflict, but also how to bring it to others that I'm in relationship with who have their own practice and, theoretically would be receptive to these teachings and to these ideas in a way that doesn't negate the insecurities that naturally come up when there's reactivity or feedback being given, or just all of the natural fears and anxieties that bubble up throughout relationships. But I'm thinking specifically about this like expectation that seems to be pretty common relationally, that like the other person has to make you feel safe all the time. Not only because that's not possible, but how that can cause suffering, and how to share that wisdom in a way that doesn't negate someone's fears, nevertheless, if that makes sense,
Well, first and foremost, we have to practice ourselves with letting go of the story of you hurt me. And instead, I feel hurt. We can, nonviolent communication style. When you said this, I felt hurt. But you're taking responsibility, 100% responsibility for your own feelings, for your own experience. Because even though other people might be saying things that are rude or nasty or harsh, it's not about that. It's about my own wiring that cares about that reacts to that. When we take that responsibility for our experience, and I don't mean by that, someone pointed out to me recently that when I say that, take 100% responsibility for your experience, people can interpret that as, oh, it's my fault that I feel bad. That's not how I'm taught. That's not it. That's not it at all. It's really that, like I can work with what's in here. And I can see that not everybody's going to have the same reaction to what was just said or done. So why don't I have a reaction that really just comes forward with compassion, that really just comes forward with empathy, that, anyway, you get it. Okay, so to work with that ourselves, to know for sure ourselves that I'm not looking for this other person to complete me or to make me happy or to act in a way that I'm going to feel good about all the time. That's just idealistic fantasy land. And even I found when I reflected on, and some of you have heard me say this many times, when I reflected on, what if this other person that I'm in a relationship with were to say and do exactly what I would want them to do? Would I then feel happy? Would I feel safe? And without thinking about it, but feeling that answer coming from the depths, was like, no, I'm not going to feel safe and happy because of that. What's going to make me feel safe and happy is my own unpacking of this wiring that has me reacting. So when you do that work and this other person you're in relationship with sees that you don't come back with anger, resentment, arguments, defensiveness, sadness, remorse, guilt, all of that package, then it's likely they're really going to be interested in what the heck you're up to. What are you doing? And when that happens, and they really want to know, then you can share what you're experiencing and what you're doing. And it's from that example that people really can pick it up to. Ajahn Gunha said, don't correct others, just correct yourself. And that really does work. And correcting others oftentimes just doesn't. So thank you for that question, Sophie. Neil, do you want to slip something in?
No, I have no idea how my hand got raised.
Okay. You were probably just clapping. Well, thank you, everyone. It's lovely to be together.